a really nice, simple way of expressing things or explaining things is to say that there are only two things in existence. There's only two things in the universe. There's either simulation or simulations, or there's non-simulation. And of these two, simulations aren't real, obviously, because they're only simulations. Yet despite this, and it's also true to say that despite the fact that all there is non-simulation, which is to say things being what they are, rather than things being interpreted in some kind of way by some kind of system, it's fair to say that all we ever know are various simulations of the world and simulations of ourselves. So that's a primary psychological fact, we could say, if we wanted to say that. And there's a lot of mileage into looking at things in this way. It's easy to understand what is meant by the word simulation if we just consider that every time we try to definitely say what something is, every time we try to define something and put a name to it, that's a simulation. Because what is being defined, what is being named, can't be named and can't be defined. It just is what it is, and it has no problems being what it is. But we could say that we have problems with it being what it is, because it's just too inscrutable, just too enigmatic, it induces a state of vertigo in us to even approach that. So instead we package it and we make it understandable and we make it kind of regular. We make it into the regular old world. So whenever we have ideas about things and talk about things, have a mental picture about things, that is the simulation. So the thinking mind is a device for creating simulations. We could also say that it's a device for simplifying things so that we can get to grips with it. Because if stuff isn't simplified, this poses a kind of conundrum for us in our daily existence. If I'm making up a cup of tea, or I'm pouring a cup of tea and then I'm putting a sugar lump in it and some milk and stirring it, all of that is a simulation. All of that is a simplification. But that simplification allows me to conduct the procedure of making a cup of tea. If I wasn't running this simulation, there would be no teacup, there would be no milk, there would be no sugar, there would be no spoon, there would be no tea, because every bit, every little element, all those elements that we normally distinguish, would be endlessly entangled with every other element, including every other element that's not actually involved in making the tea. In fact, there wouldn't be anything anywhere that would not be super entangled with it, super involved with it. It's all the one, basically. And although we like this, we like saying, oh, it's all one. It's kind of like oneness. Isn't it great? And I suppose you could say it's great. But if you were to meet it, if you were to meet oneness as you go about your daily business, as you go about your travels, if you were to meet oneness, it wouldn't be as the New Agers are fond of expressing it. It wouldn't be, here's oneness. It's like, what a lovely cup of tea. It wouldn't be like that. it would constitute the absolute greatest challenge that it is possible for anyone, for you, for me, for anyone to ever come across. The absolute challenge beyond all challenges. So if we consider that we spend our entire lives avoiding real challenges, which is to say ontological challenges, and concern ourselves with trivial challenges instead, which we then imagine to be real challenges, and then we imagine we're really getting somewhere and we really are somebody. So imagine that this is what we're doing the whole of our life, and then the real challenge suddenly appears. How's that going to sit with us? I mean, quite putting it in very simple language, we're just going to crap our pants, and that's all there is to it. On the spot. God is not nice. As the Yiddish proverb says, God is an earthquake. So all this warm and cosy talk about oneness, etc., etc., that's our worst nightmare come true just there. But at the same time, we like to kid ourselves that it isn't our worst nightmare, that we're okay about it, we're fine about it. In fact, we're in favour of it. I'm in favour of oneness. And I'm going to go around saying how great it is and feeling good. I'm going to make up some nice inspirational quotes about oneness. And then I can go around, continue with my oversimplified life as this oversimplified kind of person, being that I think I am. And at the same time, I'm going to think that this is it. I'm living my best life, or whatever it is, instead of seeing the truth that I am avoiding wholeness or oneness, or avoiding consciousness in everything I do, and that my whole life, everything about it, is an extended exercise in not seeing what's really there, or not seeing what's really going on. And it's an exercise that we all collude in. That's how come we mesh like that in society. We've got one thing in common. Doesn't matter what religion we belong to, political party or whatever. All these differences are trivial. Underneath it all, we only want to do one thing, and that's avoid oneness. And a particularly clever way of avoiding oneness is to keep prattling on about it like some goddamn type of Egypt. Because then no one can say we're avoiding oneness. And another version of this would be organised religion. Organised religion is a terrible, sleazy old scam. As Jung said, religion is our way of avoiding direct experience of God. Now, obviously that's kind of perplexing, because normally we think, okay, religion's, if I'm a religious guy, my whole thing is relating to God and having, it's I go around saying how great God is, don't I? And worshipping God, all that kind of stuff. So obviously, I'm okay with God, or at least I'm okay with my socialized, simplified idea of God. I'm okay with my simulation of God that I'm running in my head. I'm okay with that. Just like I'm okay with all of my ideas. I'm okay with my way of seeing the world in general. So to see that religion is our collective way of making damn sure that we never have any direct experience of God. After all, we have the priests and the hierarchy of the church and all of that. We know they're in touch, with the big man. So that saves us from having to worry about it. We just do what they say. And then we're doing the right thing. We're fulfilling, obeying God's will, or however else we might want to put it. It's a clever scam. I'm not saying it isn't clever, and I'm not saying it isn't effective, because it is supremely effective. If you want to avoid direct contact with God, religion is your man, none better. It's way better than just being a dumb atheist and go around saying, God doesn't exist. Because if God doesn't exist, why are you, the big idiot that you are, going around saying that he doesn't? What's wrong with you? You obviously do suspect that he does, and there's no way out of that. Atheists are God deniers. But they're not doing anything near as an effective job as your religious types are. So, moving on from discussing New Agers, religious types, we can just talk about life in general. And no matter what kind of way we have of seeing life, life in general is taken up by our, as I was saying, our number one agenda, which is to avoid the direct perception of reality, and instead of directly perceiving reality, we inhabit our simulation. We inhabit thought's simulation of reality. We say that this is all it is. Now the fact of the matter is there's a drawback to this, as I was saying earlier, and the drawback is that, I mean, there's lots of ways of talking about this drawback. The ways of talking about this drawback are endless. But it always comes to the same thing. And the drawback is that the simulation is crap. It isn't worth a fart. It's no good to us. It's a stupid, crappy kind of hoax. That if we looked into it, we'd see it was crappy, but we are too afraid to look into it, so instead we go around saying how great it is. That's what we do when we are in the mode of avoiding reality and yet at the same time trying to pretend that we're all up for it, that we're the sort of people who really want to know what reality is and face up to it and do and assume this kind of responsibility. So when we are like that, when we kind of talk about being realistic and hard-headed and not being into any bullshit, that means we are super, super, super keen to avoid any contact with reality whatsoever. We're super keen. We're even keener than the average guy. We're fundamentalists. We're fanatics in this cause. And this process is entirely natural. We retreat from infinite relativity, which is where we can't say what things are. All we can say in the realm of infinite relativity is that, and this is something Robert Anton Wilson talks about a lot, we can say this appears to be this if I look at it in the way that actually causes it to appear to be like this, which is a kind of redundant statement, so it doesn't mean shit all, really. But that's all we can do. Things are true, statements are true, only in relation to the assumptions we have had to make in order for those statements to be true, which means that if we narrow a world down a hell of a lot and ignore everything else apart from this tiny little slice of reality, then we can make definite statements, then we can have a logical system that explains things, and we can inhabit that logical system. But we can only do that by blocking out awareness of the whole. So if we say that awareness of the whole is kind of like the sun shining midday with no clouds, bright sun shining, in which things are revealed for what they are, what we're doing by only taking any notice of what we say they are or think they are, and then forgetting at the same time the relativity of this and being concrete. And concrete means that I actually conflate what I think things are with what they are, or what I say things are with what they really are. So when I conflate those two things, that's the simulation. And the simulation is crude. It's crass, it's concrete. It's obnoxiously dumb. It lacks all nuance. So here we are, we end up living in a world with no nuance, where things just are what they are said to be. But what do you do in a world like that? What the hell can you do in a world like that? With our cleverness and avoiding infinite relativity or wholeness, we've painted ourselves into a bloody corner. Out of our fear of the light, we have created a shadow world where we ourselves become shadows, and we engage in shadowy pursuits and do shadowy things and think shadowy thoughts. And there's no substance in a shadow. It has no essence in it. It has no essence in it because it is created by blocking off reality. So when I block off reality, I can create a shadow, but there's nothing in that shadow. It has no substance. So I can't afford to examine it. I can't afford to, like Plato is reputed to have said, a life unexamined is a life not worth living. But the fact of the matter is we can't afford to examine it. We make a point of never examining it. That's not the thing to do, because when we examine it, we realise that it's got nothing in it. It's a shell, it's hollow. And moreover, the identity that we construct for ourselves on the basis of this simulation, on the basis of this concrete way of looking at the world, is also a shadow, is also a hollow shell with nothing in it. So needless to say, there's not a lot of potential in that, really. Everything has to be lived on an excruciatingly superficial level, skipping from one thing to another thing to another thing, never going very deep, keeping everything shallow. And yet at the same time we do this, we're haunted or oppressed by the inevitable knowledge of our own shallowness and the knowledge of regarding the essential flimsiness or unreality of everything that we're clinging to, which drives us into having to put an awful lot of energy into validating everything for ourselves. So our lives become protracted exercises in validating what was never true in the first place. But even then we don't get away with it. We need to keep on validating, and we need to keep on distracting, and it goes nowhere because it gets more difficult as time goes on, because the sense of meaning that we have about it becomes very thin. So we find that not only is there a sense of futility in what we're doing, because it is futile, that's an honest appraisal of the situation, but also the meaninglessness. So futility relates more to action. All of our actions are futile. We say we're trying to achieve or succeed or whatever nonsensical bullshit we might want to say, but really we're doing nothing. Our actions are entirely futile and self-deceiving. So on the action side of it, everything is futile when we're living in this modality of reality denial, and our being is not futile, but it's non-existence. We have no being. We only have shadow being, which is something that's constantly under threat from the light. And so and also, as well as also being under threat, it's also engenders despair, because what we think we are is a meaningless thing, and we have to fight against seeing that it's a meaningless thing. And yet that awareness permeates through us all the same. The loss of who we really are, which permeates through, as Kierkegaard says, as despair. So that about sums it up. And clearly, none of that is much fun.